Chapter 1, Section 5, Biotalk. Plants and animals compete for resources. It is not uncommon for two organisms to compete with one another. Often, this happens when there is a limited supply of resources like water, food, sunlight, or space. If there are not enough resources to satisfy the needs of both organisms, they will compete with one another. Sometimes, this competition occurs between members of the same species. Male birds of the same species will battle each other fiercely for the ownership of a territory. The territory would allow a sufficient food and habitat for the male and female birds to make a nest, eggs, and feed offspring. Competition among individuals of the same species is a very important factor in evolutionary change. Plants must deal with competition in different ways. Usually, the plants that grow the tallest or establish the best root system are the survivors. In some cases, plants even secrete chemicals which prevent the seeds from other plants from growing. Competition may occur among members of different species. In this case, limited resources are actually the cause for competition. Female eagles usually lay 1 to 3 eggs a few days apart. 1 to 2 days is a normal age difference between eaglets. Older hatchlings often dominate the younger ones for food. In a 3-egg brood, the third chick has little chance of survival. A large number of adult eagles are non-breeders, probably due to competition within the species and variable annual food supply. Scientists have found that usually, I'll come back to this because they're going to talk about this a little bit later, so I'll come back up to this. Scientists have found that usually only one species survives in laboratory experiments studying this type of interaction. However, the real world is a much more complex situation. At times, two competitive species can exist together. For example, both hawks and owls hunt mice. Hawks hunt by day and owls hunt by night. Okay, now the next section is introducing non-native species. And this is a non-native species, meaning that it is non-native to the United States. Purple loosestrife can produce up to 2.7 million seeds per plant yearly and spreads across approximately 1 million additional acres of wetlands each year. Sometimes a new species that has not been there before is introduced into an ecosystem. This is called a non-native species. Other terms that you may hear used to refer to these organisms are exotic, alien, introduced, or non-indigenous. The introduction can be either intentional or accidental. Introduction of a non-native species can have negative effects on the ecosystem. When this happens, the species is considered invasive. It can cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. Invasive species can be plants, animals, and other organisms. All these terms are clearly defined by the U.S. government under Executive Order 13112. Why is the government so concerned with invasive species? Why should the public be concerned? Most scientists believe that on a global basis, next to habitat destruction, the second greatest destroyers of biodiversity are invasive species. In some cases, the result is the extinction of an entire existing species. Species have sometimes invaded new habitats naturally. However, human actions are the main means of invasive species introductions. When people settle far from home, they often bring with them familiar animals and plants. Other species, like rats, make the trip unintentionally. In their new habitat, they may have fewer predators or diseases, so their populations grow out of control. Organisms that they might normally prey on may not have evolved defense mechanisms. Native species may not be able to compete successfully for space or food and so are often pushed to extinction. The spread of non-native organisms destroys healthy, diverse ecosystems. It replaces them with biologically impoverished, homogeneous landscapes. It is unfortunate, but increased travel and trade are providing many new opportunities for the spread of non-native species. In addition to which, one important feature that makes a community susceptible to invasion by non-native species is the level of human-induced disturbance. For example, non-native birds such as European starlings and house sparrows do well in ecologically disrupted areas such as cities, suburbs, and farms. This is a picture of house sparrows. 100 house sparrows were introduced into Brooklyn in the 1850s. From this initial introduction, the species expanded throughout the eastern United States and Canada. House sparrows are closely tied to human activity. This sparrow is usually absent from extensive woodlands and forests and from grasslands and deserts. So instead, the sparrows prefer cities, suburbs, and farms.